So let me quickly start my presentation. And before starting my presentation, I would like to say thanks to the committee members for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present my work today. Today, I will be talking about the multidimensional metal oxides and organic electronic catalysts for environmental remediations. And these are the contents that I would be covering during my talk. That is, first, I will be discussing the role of the small organic molecules for photocatalytic applications. After that, I will be discussing the metal oxides, conducting polymers, and small organic molecules for chemical sensors. So for understanding this presentation, it is significant to know what are the semiconducting materials. As we know that these semiconducting materials, they could be of any type, like it can be polymer-based, carbon-based, or metal oxides. And these materials can be prepared through the different methodologies, as for example, through the pyrolysis, through hydrothermal, or for the fissile synthesis. And we observe their applications for different purposes. So, for example, these semiconductor materials are practically used for environmental remediation, solar cells, nanoelectronic devices, sensors, as well as for the photocatalytic applications. So today I will be briefly discuss the role of organic electronic materials or small organic molecules for the purpose of photocatalytic applications. And for understanding the procedure of the photocatalyst, it is very significant to know what photocatalyst is actually. We can understand this by considering the natural example of chlorophyll. It is a natural photocatalyst, and this is responsible for capturing the sunlight to turn the water and carbon dioxide into glucose and oxygen. And the applications of photocatalyst we observe for the sterilizing effect. As for example, like I have just said that metal oxides, they are widely used for the photocatalyst, and they are more promising as compared to the other photocatalytic material, as they work even when the cells, it covers the entire surface, and while the bacteria are actively propagating. Then the next application of photocatalyst we can observe for the deodorizing effect, air purifying effect, water purification, and this is the actual images that we have taken from the experimental work from our laboratory. And here we show how we do the photocatalytic performances of photocatalytic experiments in our laboratory. So let's first discuss the small organic molecules. And for synthesizing these small organic molecules, what we did, we designed the molecule as the conjugated donor acceptor designing, containing the benzoselenodiazole based organic material, and we applied it for the photocatalytic degradation of rose Bengal dye. So the question that it comes to our mind that why we are using the organic electronics materials, the reply is like simple, because these organic materials, they observe the more light, they are of low cost, they are stable under the sunlight illumination, and they show the high charge carrier mobilities. So for designing of this specific organic molecule, we have preferred the incorporation of the selenium unit in the donor acceptor skeleton, which drastically increased the carrier mobilities, as well as it helps in facilitating the charge transport properties and also enhance the piper stacking effects. So apart from the selenium unit, we have also incorporated the thiophene and the fluorine base units for designing of this molecule. And the purpose is like it provides a strong electron donating nature, it tailors the optical properties, and also help in enhancing the solubility parameters. So what we did in this work, we first synthesized the organic molecule and we named it as RTBSCF. After that, we made it nanocomposites with the PCBM material. As we all know that PCBM is responsible as electron acceptor, and we made this composite materials into different configurations. Say, for example, 1:2, 1:3, and more. And what we have found that when we have used the specific concentration of this composite material, it showed the degradation of the rose Bengal dye up to the 98.6%, which is very promising. And that too in a very small duration of time. say for example, just for 90 minutes. So what we thought that these nanocomposite materials are effective because they show the absorption range in the visible region. They show sufficient light generated redox potential and also the long lifetime of the photogenerated excitons. This is the brief description how we have synthesized the molecule. I'm not going to details into it. So as you can see, that synthesizing the small organic molecules is itself a difficult job because it involves the synthesis of several intermediates, and through that intermediates, we obtain the final products. And it is also very significant to characterize each and every intermediate that we have obtained during the reaction so that we can confirm the structure has been made and these intermediates are further used for obtaining the final desired material. So this is how we have done the characterizations for the intermediates, like through the proton and the carbon NMR. We have also performed the proton and the carbon NMR for the final product. And after that, we performed the mass spectroscopy. And from the mass spectroscopy, you can see that what the interesting thing we have found that molecular mass for the calculated as well as the found one is almost same for both intermediate as well as for the final product, which confirms the excellent compositions of the synthesized molecule. Thereafter, we did some structural characterizations of the synthesized nanocomposite material. That means the nanocomposite materials that have been synthesized through the organic molecule and PCBM. And what we have found here, the obtaining all the significant peaks here, it itself confirms and it shows the interaction between the two moieties. Two moieties, here I'm talking about the small organic molecule as well as PCBM. Then we perform certain optical properties. As you could see from the UV spectroscopy, what we have done, this is the UV spectroscopy of the synthesized material organic molecule, and we done it for the solution as well as for the thin film. So in case if for the solution, we obtain the two significant peaks, which are responsible or which might correspond to the pi-pi interactions. And when we have made up the thin film of this small organic molecule, what we have found, we have noticed the prominent shifting, that is the red shifting, which suggests the molecular packing, which might enhance the charge mobilities. Whereas if you could see the UV absorption spectroscopy of the composite material, it shows the absorption in the almost in all the entire visible region, which itself is very promising because this kind of materials, they show their applicability in catalytic degradations under visible light. Then we perform the PL spectroscopy, and this is the PL spectroscopy for the solution, and we have found the prominent peak at the position roughly about 637 nanometer, and this peak is due to the occurrences of certain interactions, whereas when we have found the film out of it, we again notice the shifting, which might due to the occurrences of certain kind of aggregations, say about the H or J aggregations. But the interesting thing that we have obtained in case of the nanocomposite material is that these nanocomposite materials, when they are prepared, the PL intensity has been quenched, means the density of the peaks of nanocomposite materials are reduced, which itself shows the efficient charge transfer between the molecule as well as the PCBM moiety. And furthermore, we have done the XPS spectroscopy just to make sure the chemical interactions between the synthesized nanocomposite material. And this is the morphological properties which we done through the AFM spectroscopy. And what we have found that this is like different composite materials, 1:1, 1:2, and 1:3. And we have found that it shows all the composite materials, it shows the lower roughness values, which itself suggests the good miscibility, good solubility of both the moieties, that means the organic molecule as well as the PCBM material. But what we have found when the concentration is around 1:1, here it shows certain kind of aggregated morphology. And this aggregated morphology is certainly not good for the application of the photocatalyst, because it might hamper the generation as well as the transportations of the charge carriers during the catalytic performances. And since it is the organic molecule, so we perform the electrocatalytic activity or electrocatalytic characterization to obtain the HOMO and the LUMO level. And from this, we have obtained the HOMO and the LUMO of the synthesized molecule. And we have found that it matches well with the HOMO and LUMO of the PCBM material. That means here we can expect the efficient charge transfer, which is actually the main requirement for the photocatalytic application. And since we are applying it for the photocatalytic application, it is very much significant to know the hydrophobicity of the material. Since if the material is hydrophilic in nature, it might get dissolved in the solution. So we perform the contact angle, and we have found the higher contact angle of around 91.2 degree, which shows that our material is hydrophobic and certainly applicable for the photocatalytic requirements. And this is some of the real images of the sample that we have taken out during the performance of the experiment. Like this is the initial one, then after 30 minutes, and finally after the duration of the 90 minutes. And this is how we have performed the photocatalytic activity. So what we wanted, so at first we didn't incorporate the photocatalyst into the experiment just to see the effect. And here we have found that nothing has happened, like the degradation has not occurred. However, soon after incorporating the photocatalytic material, the degradation has suddenly started. That means our nanomaterial is promising for the photocatalytic degradation of rose Bengal dye. And we done it through the UV absorption method. And we have found that with the passage of the time, the intensity of the UV absorption peak has diminished, it has decreased. And from the pie chart, it is quite obvious that the major photocatalytic activity has been done in the starting of 30 minutes. After that, the photocatalytic activity has been reduced. So this is the brief descriptions of the photocatalytic activity, that is photocatalytic degradation of the rose Bengal dye for the different composite materials. And we have obtained the highest degradation when the ratio was 1:2, and the degradation was like 98.3, that is just in 90 minutes. So since we wanted to confirm that it is simply not the procedure of the absorption, and that's why we have performed the mass spectroscopy. Here, this peak that has obtained at the position of 1022, it is corresponding to the formula mass of the rose Bengal dye. However, after the performance of the photocatalytic experiment, this peak has been splitted into several small peaks, and these small peaks are actually correspond to the intermediates. Obtaining such intermediate, it confirms that it is not only the procedure of the absorption, however, it is actually the photocatalytic procedure which has degraded the dye into less harmful intermediates material. And this is the brief description exhibiting the procedure that is involved for the photocatalytic. Like upon the illumination of the sunlight, there is generation of electrons from the HOMO level to the LUMO level of the synthesized moieties. Thereafter, these generated electrons, they get transferred to the LUMO level of the PCBM, and then it combines with dye and degrade into the less toxic materials. That was all about the application of the small organic molecules for the photocatalytic degradation. Now I am switching over the application of metal oxide conducting polymers as well as the small organic molecules for chemical sensors. Since we know that chemical sensors, they are considered as the smart materials, and they show the high speed as well as high sensitivity. Selectivity is also high, and these chemical sensing procedures are very simple as compared to the one which obtained or which existed earlier. And for the brief description of the sensor application, what we actually do, we made up the electrode materials, and these electrode materials, when the potential is applied, the responses occur. These responses are captured, or these responses are studied in the form of the signals, and these signals can be studied through various methods, as for example, electrochemical, photometric, magnetic, calorimetric method. But today, I would be discussing only the electrochemical method that are very much promising for the sensing activity. And why we are synthesizing the chemical sensor? The reply is simple. They are cheap, they are sensitive, they are selective, as well as they are fast. So, and the reason behind for selecting only the electrochemical approach, because through that approach, we can obtain or we can get the high sensitivity, wide linear range. They are economical, they are portable, they show the rapid responses, and they are easy to operate. However, there are certain challenges which are associated with this approach. As for example, scientists are still putting efforts for making the promising electrode materials to enhance the surface working electrode for the sensors, as well as to improve the surface properties of the sensing electrodes. So let's first begin with the metal oxides. The metal oxide that I have specifically taken for this are ZnO and TiO2, for the reason that they are good, they are highly stable, they are environmentally friendly, and they show the excellent physical and the chemical properties. And this is how we have synthesized the TiO2 nanotubes over the surface of the silicon substrate through the electrocatalytic method. And for the FSM images, it is quite clear that these nanotubes are aligned and they are hollow of diameter roughly about 100 to 120 nanometers. Then we perform certain Raman spectra just for making sure the structural characterization of the synthesized TiO2 nanotubes. And this is some of the interesting results that we got from the sensing results. As for example, here we have done the simple, since it is an electrochemical method, so we have performed the current voltage characteristics, and we have found that we have made up the concentrations for the diphenyl, which is a toxic chemical, and we have made up at different concentrations in the previous solution, and we have found that as the concentration is increases, the response of the current is also increases. Say for example, from this figure you can see that it shows the good linearity in the range of 0.25 micromolar to 1 micromolar. After that, it has become stagnant. The reason behind for becoming the stagnant, for getting the stagnant response, because might be due to the lack of the active sites over the surface of the electrode material. And this is the brief descriptions for how this TiO2 nanotubes has been effectively applied for the chemical sensor properties, because we know that here phenylhydrazine is the chemical that we have detected through this TiO2 nanotubes arrays, and the phenylhydrazine chemical, it got first chemi-absorbed over the surface of the TiO2 nanotubes, and then it generated the oxygenated species over the surface of the tubes. And the next metal oxide that we have used is the ZnO oxide, which is the zinc oxide. And here we have got the interesting morphology of zinc oxide. That is, these are the aligned nanorods over the surface of the conducting TiO2. And from the morphological images, it shows that the diameter is roughly about 200 to 300 nanometer, and the length of these nanotubes or rods are 3 to 5 micrometer. These are some of the characterizations that we have performed just to make sure that our ZnO nanorods have been synthesized. And this is the sensing results. And here what we have done through this electrocatalytic activity, you can see that it shows the oxidation current of when we have not incorporated the hydrazine, which is the anilete here, the current response was actually nothing. But when we have incorporated the hydrazine, the oxidation current has been increased, and it shows the high sensitivity of this much value. And this is briefly, we have shown how this actually happened. That is the sensing of the phenylhydrazine over the surface of the ZnO nanorods. After that, we have also tried to apply the conducting polymers. And here, as we know that polypyrrole is a conducting polymers, and here we have made up the aligned nanofibers of conducting polymers, and we have applied it for the detection of the meta-dihydroxybenzene. From the morphological images, if you see from the surface view, it is more similar like the dots. However, when we have taken the tilted view, it clearly shows the appearances of the nanofibers over the surface of the silicon. And this is again some of the characterization that we have performed just to make sure the structural crystalline as well as the morphological properties of the synthesized materials. And this is the interesting part of the work, that is the sensing part. And here we have made up the diode. When we have just taken the PN junction, that is the aligned polypyrrole over the surface of the silicon, which is N-type, here the nature of the current is like symmetrical, which means the current increases forwardly as well as in the backward direction linearly. However, when we have substituted the PT electrode on top of it, suddenly the nature of the current has been changed and it is showing the nonlinear behavior. That means it may be because after the deposition of the PT, it has created the Schottky barriers between the polypyrrole as well as the silicon substrate. And we have performed, these are some of the sensing parameters that we have obtained through the experiment. And apart from the meta-dihydroxybenzene, we have also performed the sensing performance in the same solution for its isomers like para and the orthodihydroxybenzene. But we have found that our synthesized sensor is capable of detecting the meta-dihydroxybenzene the most as compared to its oligomers. And from this, we have also performed the stability data. Stability data means we just wanted to know how long our sensors is stable at ambient conditions. So we performed the sensing parameters or sensing experiments for 30 consecutive days, but as you could see from the histograms, it didn't show any specific deterioration. That means that our sensor itself is sensitive as well as stable under the room temperature conditions. And we wanted to check how the electrode properties has been changed before and after the sensing experiment. From this image showing the electrode that is before the experiment, before performing the sensing experiment. And here it exhibits the 3 NMR peaks. However, after performing the experiment, we have obtained one additional peak, which corresponds to the NH group of the phenylene during the sensing measurement. That means the electrode surface has been chemically changed and it shows that it is responsible for exhibiting the chemical sensing properties. Lastly, I will quickly discuss the applications of the organic moieties, organic molecule for the purpose of for the detection of the heavy metal ions, say for example, the chromium and the copper. And here we have designed a specific molecule, which we have named as indium-based organic semiconductor. Here the hexyl side chain, it enhances the solubility in the common solvent, as well as it is also helpful for the molecular packing, for improving the charge transfer properties, and for the formation of the excellent thin films without much crystallization. And for performing the experiment, that is for using it for the detection of the heavy metal ions, we made up the composite of this synthesized organic molecule with the carbonaceous material. Here we have made up the composite with the graphene oxide for the reason that graphene oxide is highly stable. It shows a pi conjugation and it is hydrophilic in nature. And this is how we have designed the molecule. Several intermediates we have obtained the design. And this is the final product, which we have named as HTT material. Again, like I said before, that it is very significant to characterize both the intermediates as well as the final product that have been obtained during the synthesis of the organic moieties. And we done it all. So I'm skipping this part. And let's see the morphological properties. From the morphological images, it shows the irregular rod-like structures. And this is the very common morphology for the organic molecule. And we have found that when the concentration of the graphene oxide was little higher, say for example, the 1 milligram in the composite, Here we obtain certain kind of aggregations, and these aggregations are not good for the performance of the chemical sensing. So it is very significant to justify or to make appropriate nanocomposites in their appropriate compositions. And these are some of the optical properties of the synthesized moieties with the graphene oxide, and it exhibits that there is some interactions between the graphene oxide as well as the synthesized moiety, that is HTD, which has been confirmed from the UV spectroscopy as well as from the PLS spectroscopy. Then we perform the structural characterization through FTIR and Raman spectroscopy. As we know that from the Raman spectroscopy, in case of the graphene oxide, the G band generally occurs at the position of the 1356, whereas the D band at the position 1595. However, in our case, it has been little shifted, which is because due to the incorporation of the HTD material and the interaction of the HTD material with graphene oxide. Then these are some of the experience studies which we have performed just to further show the characterization or to make sure the interaction between the two moieties. And this is the heart of the work, that is the sensing performances. For this, since we have taken the glassy carbon electrode and we wanted to see the effect of our synthesized catalyst for the sensor. So first we have performed the catalytic activity without depositing any material over the surface of the electrode. Then we have incorporated just graphene oxide, and finally we have deposited our synthesized nanocomposite material over the surface of the graphene glassy carbon electrode. And you can see that it shows a very promising redox reaction with promising oxidation as well as the reduction peak. And since we wanted to perform it for the detection of the heavy metal ions, so what we did, we incorporated several heavy metal ions into the solution, and we have found that our sensor is promising for detecting the chromium and the copper as compared to the other incorporated heavy metal ions. And one more thing, that we have obtained a higher peak for the chromium ion as compared to the copper ion as compared to the chromium ion. That might be due to the formation of intermetallic compounds and the existence of the competition between the analyte and the interfering ions for the active sites. And since our sensor is capable of detecting the chromium and the copper ions, we have performed the sensing experiment, and these are the sensing parameters that we obtained. And finally, it is very important to know about the reproducibility as well as the stability of the material. For the sake of the reproducibility, what we did, we made up the 6 different electrodes under the same environment, under the same room conditions, and we checked it for the detection of the chromium and the copper ions. And all the 6 electrodes, they showed almost the same performance. We did not see any major difference between them. That means that our synthesized electrode is reproducible, and for the purpose of the stability, we performed this sensing parameter sensing experiment for 30 consecutive days, and it didn't show any major deterioration in the electrode surface. That means our synthesized electrode or in synthesized chemical sensor are both reproducible as well as stable. And finally, we wanted to check the real samples. Say, for example, here we have taken the tap water apart from the PBS solution, that is phosphate buffer solution. And we have found that the intensity for the case of the tap water is somehow lower, which might be due to the presence of the lower concentration of the chromium and the copper ion into the tap's water. And that's all. So conclusively, what we have done, we have synthesized different organic molecules. We have synthesized different metal oxides, different conducting polymers, and we applied them promisingly for the degradation, for the catalytic activity, as well as for the chemical sensors. And that's all. So I'm now open for the questions. Please